In front of me, and we'll be taking a walk out there later on, stands a small forest. It's the end result of miles and miles of thought over the years, and I'm very anxious to penetrate the forest, listening to the signatures of each of the trees, and eventually, over a 5-year span of time, turn up and hear the entire forest. The atmosphere of the forest obviously is quite important too. As counterpoint to the forest, the intrusion by my sculptures here in terms of wood and wire, the signal discs, the other complicated terrain instruments, those are going to be used to explore the counterpoints, the harmonies, and the real out-and-out expected kinds of surprises that will make it happy. Some kind of discovery between the harmonies of sculptural intrusions into the forest. I guess when I try to reminisce over or look back over this life, I think I really enjoy those early days when I began soaking up experiences that I really didn't know how they would fit. As a matter of fact, it didn't occupy my mind as to how they would fit. I think that the fact that I was thrown into the orphanage at age 5 sort of, in my mind, made me struggle and win very early independence by throwing tantrums. It kept a lot of people off my back. I was able to freely search out and explore the orphanage. It had bounds, yet I wasn't able to discern any bounds. I fantasized where things stopped and started, things that happened in the lilac bushes, and things that happened in the crab apples, which I was able to, I guess, learn that I could get up early in the morning and shake down and get the biggest crab apples. But the explorations were very early in terms of sound and nature, playing around on very calm, soft, snowy days. My favorite, all-time favorite, was sitting down a hill and watching a farmer in overalls plow up fresh spring dirt, and seeing the blackbirds steal the kernels out of that, and hear hissing steam, and take a visit down to the generating plant where they generate electricity, and hearing all kinds of sounds, slapping leather on big belts, steam, real quiet snow, wind through the trees, a lot of mischievousness and cops and robbers, and I was left alone, and I came out of that 5 years really loaded, a real thick and heavy sponge, but I didn't know where I was going yet. But at least no one tampered with that soaking up problem. When I think about the things that I want to hear in this forest, it almost requires the absence of the eyes entirely. And moving around here, it requires that I use my eyes, but I don't mean my eyes, and it's difficult to convey that. I guess I should turn on the blindfolds now. But what do I expect to hear? I think I expect to hear an answer to a pivotal motivation that I have been aware of, bobbing in and out of my life, reaching certain peaks in which I question the existence or the momentariness or the fleeting aspects of things that endure time, things that stay on as the human parade moves on. It's very easy to arrive at that solution. That is, used to stay in one spot and people, places, and faces move on. But the single motivation, I think, has been a lifelong puzzlement over the word classic. And we hear classics all the time. The earth spinning and producing the surface winds. Those are the classics to me. And I think what I expect to hear is the fulfillment of a classic that doesn't have a sense of place, and yet instantaneously, or at least attachable to the human ear, to the mind. I yearn to get the answer to what I expect to hear. I'm trying to tell you what I expect to hear. I expect to hear a classic that doesn't attach itself to era or to even seasonal cycles. And the language is the language of the physical dynamics of nature. So I think what I'd like to hear is a transitory classic. There's a lot of work in probing the interior dynamics of nature, getting inside of the tree when the sap flows. There's a lot of work in probing the interior dynamics of nature, getting inside of the tree when the sap flows in the fall and ready for the spring sap flow. There's a lot of struggle to hear this classic. When I hear it, it's satisfying. I think the sculptural processing and manipulation I most deeply feel is a mental activity, and getting it into the head with the seeing clarity of the ears relaxes the eyes so they can refresh themselves and seek out new imaging sources that will rejuvenate that electrical system, and let the ears go out front for a little while. Well, when I think of a life filling up with experiences and trying to put it into some kind of chunks, I look at the middle section of the experience in my life, where quite a few things stand out in my mind. Symbols of sound, interest in sound, that I felt that I just had so long to live. I'm talking in retrospect now. Obviously, I didn't know at that time. That I felt a grasp of something in terms of sound, and I decided to start with, and so I fled the Korean War, and spent 2 years with the CBC in Canada. After that time, I gathered around me a lot of symbols. Nipper, the dog, that and a red typewriter is about the only thing I kept out of those mid-years. And audio tape was of great interest to me, although I really don't believe in 7.5 inches per second, that you should retain things. But I was very fascinated with audio tape. That was a symbol. I went through the early days in radio, from paper back now to polyester backing. And Nipper kept the thing alive for me all these years. And another thing about recording was the retention of audio on old 78 records. So the things that I would deal with later on in my life, I sort of plowed through. And my career in radio was disc jockeying and interviews and eyewitness reports, and all turns out to be very obnoxious kinds of mundane things. I was very bored with it, and I felt that I wasn't getting at the heart of my interest in sound, and I felt that the life is just so long, and I tried to pinpoint it, and so I had to flush the career of radio broadcasting down the toilet in '59. And I did so in a very happy mood. That was the time when John Kennedy was nominated. I bowed out of the radio and saying that I didn't feel it was challenging. There was nothing original about it. So that career did go down the drain. It's recycled now. And with it went the microphone. The microphone, after all those years, I found out that's exactly the thing I didn't want to use. And so the sound plowing through those mid-years focused on the very device that I would use in the terrain instruments here now, the transducer. It makes you search out for sound. It's not readily there and readily available like in the microphone.
Leif, I understand you call these pieces of sculpture whistlers.
Yeah, I thought, Stuart, what we do is look at the little parts in the sculpture, the separate monitoring entities that comprise the big terrain instrument, and I'll go up the ladder and see what's in the air today besides the chill.
And you use magnetic transducers to pick up the sound of the wind and the rain as they interrelate with your sculpture?
Yeah, the ones I'll show you now are magnetic. There are other kinds of transducers that I can use that are available. But get this in the brush red for a watt box. Let's have that other one. So let me just hold that.
Okay.
See. Get up into the clouds now. My fingers placed in the 1-inch whistler, aluminum tube. This is the flow of wind that creates the whistler. I don't show you the transducer that I'll use. It measures the vortices, the wind passing through, and I can get a signal and sound from them. But the transducer here is the magnetic transducer, and it will pick up any event that happens, whether it's a dragged fingernail or just a interesting kind of nervous trill, a wing flapping, or any kind of natural occurrence. Snowflake hung up there. The sound of the tube itself. Snowflake, real hard, crusty one. This one, this transducer is adhered to, like all three of these are, with beeswax. I've got it placed in there with next to the pigtails. So anything that happens, Stuart, is going to be sensed by these transducers. The third one here.
Do you also consider the relationship between the rain and the wind as a form and the sculpture as a form?
Yeah, in a way, when you hear these things, I mean, the example I give you, I can run this again. There are analogies to, at least they conjure up in my mind, dots and linear kinds of sounds. Yeah, I wish that you could hear the transducer of the whistler, but you know what a whistle is, you know, whistling in the dark. It's a kind of sound, but they're linear and dots of sound, and they're not very obtrusive. Good bird rests, and they're recyclable parts as one entity in the big terrain instrument. But mainly the vortice of the wind passing through is measured to producing the sound. The transducers pick up everything that happens.
The signal disc looks entirely different than the whistlers. Is it relating to different aspects of nature?
Yeah, it really, it sits under the tree, and the leaves when the rainfall acts as a very dramatic kind of filtering effect on it. The transducers, there are two of them in place, and the rain strikes quite a few things. The few raindrops get through here, and so the filtering effect of the leaves is enormous. There's a great interaction. I don't have to do anything, and it takes care of an ordinary rain very much striking all these surfaces.
Then how is the sound carried to your recording studio from the disc?
The transducers, I show two of them here in place. They're fed to the preamp, the brush red for watt box.
Yes.
And their signal is boosted a little slightly, and then it's amplified. And the output from the transducers are fed to the laser. And when I'm ready to monitor this one signal disc, I can line up the laser and aim it for my studio. I can go back in the studio and monitor this event, because I usually work by myself.
I noticed there's several signal discs spread around the forest. Is that because there's different sounds in different places in the forest?
Yeah, each signal disc is under a type of leaf cover. The one I think we're heading into now is about under a 65% leaf cover. So the leaves, again, at each of the 8 signal discs have that same kind of filtering effect. And occasionally the rain gets through and strikes the copper resonator that's on this particular signal disc. This one is not done. The one we just left was completed. But here again, the single raindrop occasionally comes through and strikes this resonator. The effect of the rain coming through here and the effect that it has in the leaves is just a great help, because I can't be out here waving any kind of flags to control the rain, so the leaves do it for me. And all the 8 signal discs respond differently.
And so this is another one of the elements in your terrain instrument.
Just one entity in the larger terrain instrument, yeah.
Leif,
Howdy, Steward.
and these sculptures, which you call tree harps, are another part of your terrain instrument?
Yeah, and a very important and integral part of it, as a matter of fact.
Are these turnbuckles more than sculptural elements?
Well, the turnbuckles are essential because as this one is kind of relaxed now, I got to exert a lot of pressure on this strand to reach the frequency that I want to monitor the breezes.
Then these blocks and the strands together sense the tree's movement.
Yeah, the sounding boards here, two this tree harps, they hug the 50-year-old birch tree, and in a 5-mile-an-hour breeze, the tree sways, and so the harps itself sways, but there's a little interaction with the tree groan and the harp hum together. And but the tree harps is one of the life signs in the terrain instrument, and it's a vital and important part of the instrument's whole, although we can't show you the whole tree harp system now. I mean, in this shot.
Mm-hmm.
But we can go over and look at some more of the tree harp system. Show you this one. Yeah, and when I think of life signs along the way, I've encapsulated my life, and obviously there are a lot of nuances that you can't stick in at 7.5 inches per second, but I tried to give you some kind of a feel of 3 different stages. I think the key stage in my work was when I was about to graduate in '72 with Gloria from the Art Institute in Chicago. I did a couple of things from the top of the mountain. And so just this year, someone called my attention to a remark Gertrude Stein made. And she said that when you're there isn't there. I had that feeling in 1972 that I reached the top of the mountain, that I had started exploring with the transducer in my early snowflake composition research. And yet, when I was at the top of the mountain and I looked down, I could see that there was a long way to go. And so with the clock, another symbol of mine to keep me interested in pure notes and sound, I wasn't discouraged when the clock struck 10. And I realized that the thing that Gertrude Stein had said, when you're there, you're not there, I think what my interpretation of that is that you really know you're there when you're there, and I feel like I'm there. My intention, I guess, in this final work, and I hope you'll get the feel of it in this tape, is that my intention is to use nature a little more directly. When I think back at those years when I was listening to Wagner on old 78 RPM records, I was made aware of how all these other guys were inspired by nature. You know, they tried to make mirror images of nature. They got goose pimples by hearing nature and orchestrating the ring of Nibelungs. People turned paint into admiration of light, but I think my work has had the same, a little more direct use of nature, like tuning up the trees. In general, in sum, then I can wrap it up succinctly by saying that I'd like to hear what I can't see, and the orchestration of natural events. The big highlight of my life probably when I tune up the forest and I am able to hear it, and again get that same feeling that what Gertrude Stein said: when you're there, you're there, and you really know when you're there. I conclude this experience at 7.5 inches per second with a pretty exciting plan. I feel like I'm grabbing hold simultaneously with a falling leaf, and at the same time grasping a cloud that rises and is subject to dissipation. But there's something very exciting when you feel around in the dark, and you know that I know that the eye has been replaced by the ear, and it's some of those things that I'd like to share with you.